Meeting to order, and if we could please start roll call.
Okay, I'll take care of roll call, and board members, please, as a reminder, we're going to go by alphabetical order, and so we need to hear your response. So please be ready to respond as we go down the list. So let me start with Chair Lynn Ortega.
Present.
Vice Chair Alderman Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Antonio Araujo. Mayor Ivy Avalos.
Present.
Thank you. Senator Cesar Blanco. Senator Blanco. Okay, we'll get back. Senator Joseph Cervantes from New Mexico. Okay, Trent Doolittle.
Present.
Thank you. Representative R. Fierro.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Representative Mary Gonzalez.
Present.
City Manager Tommy Gonzalez.
Present.
Thank you. Representative Cassandra Hernandez.
Present.
Thank you. Yvette Hernandez.
Present.
Commissioner Ileana Holguín.
Present.
Representative Raimundo Lara. Okay. Mayor Oscar Leeser.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Manuel Leos.
Present.
Representative Cecil Lizárraga.
Present.
Thank you. Chuck McMahon.
Present.
Thank you. Representative Joe Moody.
Present.
Alderman Esteban Olivas. Okay. Representative Claudia Ordaz Perez.
Present.
Thank you. Norma Palacios.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Javier Perea.
Present.
Okay. Representative Henry Rivera.
Present.
Thank you. Sam Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Benjamin Romero. Okay. Judge Ricardo Samaniego.
Buenos dias, present.
Thank you. Ellen Smythe.
Present.
Okay. Tomás Treviño.
I'm present, Eduardo.
Thank you. And Mayor Diana Trujillo.
Present.
Thank you. All right, Madam Chair, we do have quorum. We're going to move on to public comment.
Yes. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment right now?
We do not. They have signed up for item 8.
Thank you. Then let's go ahead and start with agenda items with number 1.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So item 1 is discussion and action to approve the minutes of the January 22nd, 2020 El Paso MPO TPB meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion to approve in a second. I'd like to go ahead and continue the past procedure. Is there anyone that is against the motion or opposes it? Hearing none, it is approved. Item 2.
Item 2, designate Eduardo Calvo as the authorized representative of the El Paso MPO for the purpose of executing the Federal Transit Administration's fiscal year 2021 certifications and assurances.
Motion to approve. Rivera.
Second.
Okay, all right, Rivera, motion to approve, and I think it was Lizárraga on the second. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Hearing none, it passes. Eduardo, do you want us now to proceed with the report or go to the next item?
As you know, Madam Chair, there is a request to move item 8 up to the agenda since we have a very special guest as part of that presentation. Let me just double check here. I think I did see them already connected. So I think we will be asking if we could move up the item.
All right, is there a motion to move up item 8 on our agenda, which is a report on the border transportation master plan?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, there is a motion and a second. Anyone against? Hearing none, we can go ahead and move up item 8 on our agenda, and let's go ahead and get started then, Eduardo, if you could proceed.
Thank you. All right, so item 8 is a border transportation master plan update. We have the Texas Secretary of State and Caroline Mays from TxDOT that will be handling the presentation. So with that, let me just verify if Secretary, I think you're on, and Caroline as well.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Eduardo. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. So let me start.
Good morning,
Secretary.
Eduardo. Caroline is here too as well. Good morning. Thank you.
Excellent, great. So let me introduce the Secretary of State, and before that, I want to thank you again for agreeing to be part of this presentation, Secretary. It's great to have you here. So let me just read the quick bio. Ruth Ruggiero Hughes was sworn in as a 113th Texas Secretary of State on August 19, 2019. Secretary Hughes is one of the 6 state officials named by the Texas Constitution to form the executive department of the state. In addition to serving as the Texas Chief Elections Officer, Secretary Hughes is also a senior advisor and liaison to the governor for border and Mexican affairs and is the state's chief international protocol officer. Secretary Hughes has a proven record of public service, most recently having served as chair and commissioner representing employers at the Texas Workforce Commission, where she worked to foster opportunities for economic growth for partnering with the business community to provide employers with a variety of resources to expand their businesses, as well as implementing initiatives for youth, veterans, women entrepreneurs, and people with disabilities. Secretary Hughes received a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Texas at Austin and a Juris Doctor degree from the Rutgers Camden School of Law, and she earned a certificate in leader development at the U.S. Army War College's National Security Seminar. So with that, Secretary, again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you for some initial comments.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. As we start to thaw out, just want to take a moment to recognize what our state is going through, and that our prayers are with all the families and all the people in all the communities across our state that are suffering as they work to get electricity and water back. So really grateful to be able to be on this call today. And I know we're all doing what we can to help our neighbors across the state. As Eduardo mentioned, I am the Secretary of State. I am honored to have been invited by the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization to present an executive summary of the Border Transportation Master Plan as developed by the Border Trade Advisory Committee, or as we call it frequently, BTAC, because we do love our acronyms. So the BTAC group, alongside Caroline Mays and I, the director for the Freight Trade and Connectivity at the Texas Department of Transportation, have all been working towards this border master plan. And I'm so grateful to Caroline for her willingness to be on this call and make this presentation to you alongside with me today. I want to take a moment to recognize the Executive Committee for the Transportation Policy Board at the El Paso MPO for this invitation, as well as Representative Lina Ortega, Chair of the MPO, Mayor Lisa, Judge Samaniego, and the many other official local leaders and state leaders that are listening in. I want to thank you for your continued commitment to public service on behalf of El Pasoans. And of course, I want to thank Caroline and her team at TxDOT for their tireless efforts and their tremendous partnership throughout this process of creating this master plan. They really helped to ensure that our BTAC meetings ran smoothly and that we progressed at the pace that was needed in spite of the many logistical challenges that were presented by the pandemic. We also thank our Mexican counterparts at the state and the federal level, including leadership from our Mexican border states who actively engaged with us and shared their feedback and input on how both Texas and Mexico can benefit from investments in infrastructure that ensure our continued mutual prosperity. And of course, today's presentation would not be possible without the contributions of our BTAC members, such as Eduardo Calvo and so many of you who are from and represent El Paso that have brought to the discussion your unique perspectives and expertise as we seek to help address the needs of our border communities. The ongoing mission of BTAC has been to work collaboratively with TxDOT, committee members, and border stakeholders so that we create a positive and lasting impact for our border communities through the completion of this plan. And the plan's ultimate goal is to identify and highlight infrastructure priorities and projects, as well as the funding needs for the necessary improvements that will benefit quality of life in our border communities and support our state's economic vitality and global competitiveness for decades to come. Throughout this process, BTAC members have provided invaluable feedback towards the completion of this border master plan. And this vital feedback has informed the importance of the border region to the Texas economy, recognize the enormous opportunities for advancements that we're all well aware of through our border crossings, but also looking at the challenges that we face if we do not improve the capacity and operations of our current infrastructure. That negative economic impact, that we may suffer if we don't address these infrastructure challenges now is something that this plan addresses, and we try to offer a comprehensive set of recommended policies, programs, and projects. And all of this is thanks to the contributions of BTAC members and stakeholders that helped us to address and identify these issues and needs from their expertise and their on-the-ground experiences. We're very grateful for that. And of course, our BTAC members are keenly aware of the need to act proactively to really avoid these potential negative impacts to not only the border communities, but also the entire state if these issues are not addressed. So one of the main concerns identified is increasing border crossing times. If these wait times are not addressed accordingly, they're going to have a devastating effect on the supply chains of the manufacturing industries, as well as other economic sectors that would eventually hinder commerce, affecting businesses not only in Texas, but across the nation. We know El Paso, with its 4 border crossings, is in many ways sometimes experiencing some of these impacts. We saw in 2019 alone, there were $68.3 million in economic productivity losses that were caused by border delays. So, put it in other terms, it's a GDP loss of more than $5,000 a minute. In such an unprecedented year, BTAC has also discussed the unique challenges that COVID presented to cross-border trade, challenges that led to, of course, mutually agreed upon travel restrictions between the U.S. and Mexico. And these restrictions affected travel as well as supplier operations. If we ever had a doubt about our interdependency, with our trading partners, the pandemic certainly brought to light the importance of our supply chains and maintaining a free flow of goods and commerce, where possible. So thankfully, due to the strong relationship that we have between Texas and our Mexican partners and the resilience and the experience of our border stakeholders, we're making progress, and we continue to successfully navigate the difficult times that are presented by the pandemic. And such unprecedented situations are a reminder that not all cross-border challenges involve infrastructure needs and projects. Problems at border crossings can also involve challenges to operational efficiency, as we've discussed in many of our meetings. So this plan, crafted with the guidance of BTAC members and experienced stakeholders, offers recommendations that improve those operational efficiencies and identifies possibilities for bilateral coordination between agencies and other stakeholders across the border. Our shared border with Mexico, as many of you know, is an invaluable economic asset which benefits the entire state. We share over 1,200 miles, and that makes us the largest international border in the continental U.S., the border between Texas and Mexico. And of course, our points of entry and our border crossings are considered strategic national assets that sustain that trade between our two countries. 29 of the 49 vehicular border crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border are located in Texas, and 6 of the 10 rail crossings are located here as well. These crossings are part of our state's multimodal transportation system at the Texas-Mexico border, and they're essential for the efficient flow of people and goods across our countries. These systems, coupled with economic opportunities such as NAFTA and now the USMCA, have created a positive regional economic environment that benefits all of North America. Trade through the Texas-Mexico border directly supports over 7 million jobs in both countries, and the border generates more than $350 billion in GDP annually as of 2019. So over the course of this presentation, we're going to see the economic impact of those goods that move across the Texas-Mexico border and reaches Canada, the entire United States, and Mexico. 68% of the trade between the U.S. and Mexico passes through our border area. And Texas and Mexico are already each other's #1 trading partners. With the passage and the gradual implementation of the new USMCA, we can expect cross-border trade will continue to steadily grow. USMCA is going to rely on an efficient border to move even larger volumes of trade in the future. If Texas makes the commitment now to adopt the recommended improvements to existing infrastructure and operational efficiencies as outlined in the plan, our state's border multimodal transportation systems will be able to keep pace with the continuing growth of the trade and commercial relationships between Texas and Mexico, which in turn will continue to benefit the entire North American region. So to that end, this past December, Carolyn and I presented this plan to the TxDOT Commission, and it received positive feedback from the commissioners. We're hoping to hold a final vote on the plan's approval during their upcoming March 25th meeting. In closing, today's presentation of the Border Master Plan is the culmination of years of hard work, as well as the collaborative efforts of countless stakeholders, and we're excited to present a summary of the findings to you this morning. Thank you for allowing me the time to provide some of these remarks, and I look forward to presenting this plan alongside Carolyn Mays as we highlight how the Lone Star State is working to forge an even brighter future for all on both sides of the border. And with that, I will turn it over to Caroline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Hughes. Eduardo, pulling the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we're ready to do that, Caroline, unless you prefer to share your screen, but we have it ready, whatever you prefer.
Okay, if you can pull it, that'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Gabby, I think it's yours.
Okay, again, thank you very much, Eduardo, for the invitation, and Madam Chair and members of the Transportation Policy Board. Really a pleasure to be with you this morning. You heard a lot from Secretary Hughes, and I will try to go as fast as I can on the PowerPoint. Again, this is a replica of what we presented to the Transportation Commission back in December. So next slide, please. This slide just gives you a quick overview of the plan itself. It's essentially a binational but also comprehensive multimodal plan that not only highlights the issues and needs, but also highlights the strategies to move forward in terms of how we better facilitate cross-border movement of people and goods. The plan is guided by the 9 goals you see on your right-hand side of the screen. From mobility and reliability, Secretary Hughes talked a little bit about border wait time, border delays, but also, some of the key goals here is economic competitiveness. We'll talk a little bit about later in terms of what that really entails. Next slide. The plan, as Secretary Hughes mentioned, was guided by very extensive stakeholder engagement. As you can see here, The Border Trade Advisory Committee was a pillar for that engagement, but also the 3 regional binational steering committee, including the El Paso one, were very instrumental in the plan development, and numerous meetings we held, binational meetings with Mexico before the pandemic. We spent quite a bit of time in Mexico City to ensure that, again, we were engaging our Mexican counterparts so that this can be a binational plan. Next slide. And here, this map, we love to show this because when people talk about the border, they think that the interest or the key area of focus is just the border, but this shows you where we got feedback from, comments or interest on the border master plan. As you can see, it's all over the United States, goes as far as, the Northeast, California, but also in Mexico as well. These are people that at one point or another either participated in meetings or provided comments on the border master plan. Next slide. And Secretary Ayuso mentioned some of this already, and you all know a lot of the statistics. As you know, Texas and Mexico, we share the longest common border of the southern states, which is 60%. And then the other states, the other 3 states, share the 40%. And really, some of the biggest things here is that Texas account for 68, almost 70% of U.S.-Mexico trade. And really, trade that comes through Texas is a big economic contributor to not just U.S. but Mexico in 2019. Texas-Mexico border generated over $350 billion in annual GDP. And I'll talk a little bit about later, the border region's population continues to grow, as you see later, as well as employment as well. Next slide. And this slide just shows you the multimodal transportation network that facilitates the movement of people and goods through the Texas-Mexico border. And I won't go into a lot of details there, but I wanted to highlight rail is a big component of what moves, especially goods. We also have seaports that are part of that, that system. And then, of course, roadways. And in your case, you do have, I-10, a major east-west corridor that connects the region to the rest of the U.S. And then also looking at, some of the other, minor but, critical corridors within that region that facilitates trade, through the border. Next slide. This here, Secretary Hughes talked about a little bit about the economic importance of the border. This is just looking at people movement. And with the findings, what we found is that most of the people movement across the border is localized. When I say localized, means especially in El Paso, you have a lot of students that live in Mexico that are crossing into El Paso to go to UTEP, etc. People are crossing the border to go shopping, to the hospitals and all of this thing. So that's a little bit different than the goods movement side that you see later. But also that generates huge economic benefit to the border region. And in this case, in 2019, it generated over $9.3 billion in GDP, and that's forecasted to grow by 33% in 2050 to over $12 billion in GDP. Next slide. And when you look at the goods movement side, it's a little bit different. The numbers are a little bit staggering. In 2019, the GDP generated by cross-border movement of goods through the Texas-Mexico border was around over $343 billion in GDP. And that's forecasted to pretty much triple by 2050. So when you see the goods movement side, the numbers are very staggering. And that really, underscores, I think, one of the things we've tried to do is articulate the role the border plays in the economic competitiveness of not just Texas and not just Mexico, but the U.S. and many states within the country and Canada as well. Next slide. And on this slide, one of the things we did as part of the border master plan analysis was look at not, the socio-economic indicators, because the border is not just about moving people and moving goods, The border is actually a place that people live, people have jobs there, etc. So we looked at population, when you looked at it, the border grew really fast, between 1999 and 2019, 70%, which is, they outpaced US and Mexico national numbers, and it's projected to continue to grow, although at a much slower pace. It's still, very healthy growth where you're going from 7.4 million to 8.8 million by 2050. And then in terms of employment, similar thing, the border employment grew by 90%. So the border is gained between 1990 and 2019, very sizable amount, from 1.5 to almost 3 million jobs in the border region. And we're talking binational here. This is both Texas side and Mexico side. And it's going to continue to have a healthy growth in employment, 72% by 2050. Same with income. We've seen the income of the border region grow between 1990 and 2019, where you're looking at, almost, 20% growth, and that's still projected to continue about the same, looking at 23% growth by 2050. Next slide. Now, when we really look at kind of past, present, and future movement of people, what we've seen from the data is that 46% of U.S.-Mexico personal crossings occurred through the Texas-Mexico border. Again, we're talking about the entire southern border, so that means almost 50% of people moving crossing through the Texas-Mexico border. But there was some decline in the movement of people across the border, and I'll talk a little bit about later what that looks like, in terms of people moving by different modes, as you see here. So next slide. So here it really gives you kind of a better view of what that looked like. In terms of people moving by buses, we actually saw a decline between 1996 and 2018. And we project that the decline will continue at about 2% between 2019 and 2050. But we did see an increase of bicyclists and pedestrians between the same period. And actually, we forecast that will continue to grow. So you're going to see more people walking across the border, more people biking across the border. And some of the questions that we've been asked is, why is that the case? And, we've heard a lot of things about crossing time taking too long when you're in your personal vehicle or the buses, so people just rather walk or bike across the border. So those are some of the things. Privately owned vehicle also declined between 1996 and 2019, but we're forecasting that will continue to grow. In spite of the decline that we saw previously, because again, more people are buying vehicles, more people are commuting back and forth, so you're going to see a healthy growth when it comes to personal owned vehicles. Next slide. And here, in terms of moving goods, again, on the goods movement side, it's a little bit much more dramatic, and I think this is where I always urge, us to kind of pay attention, because regardless of the economy, you've seen over the last couple of years, goods movement continues to grow. And between 1996 and 2019, we saw 112% growth. And really the most interesting thing is we saw about 3.3% annually in that growth. And the projections moving forward to 2050, it's similar, whereby you're really going to see the increase from 2.4 million to 7.7 million, or 168% growth between 2019 and 2050. And this is, I think, where we have to pay a lot of attention, because again, this is commercial vehicles, this is trucks that we're talking about. So all the border crossings will see a great number of trucks crossing, in the years to come. Next slide. This is looking at the rail side of things. Rail grew, but not as much as the trucks, but still is a healthy growth, where you're looking at 305% at 6.3 annually. Rail has a healthy share But the challenges there, I think I didn't mention earlier, we only have, so many rail crossings, and some of the issues there will, in the future, will become rail congestion, single track issues that might limit. As you can see, we had a healthy growth previously, and we're looking at 3% growth moving forward. So that's a decline. That's almost growth, in half, growing in the next few years. So again, there's opportunities there as well. Next slide. And this slide just wanted to show you, again, speaking to people outside of the border region, why does the border matters to them? That's really the message here. How do they benefit from the Texas-Mexico border? So if you see on the US side, the states with the highest GDP impacts related to trade. You see Texas, of course, you see Michigan, you see Illinois, you see California, and you see Ohio. So this is the message that we've always been asked is, how can we show other states that the border matters to them, that the border is not just for Texas, that the border matters to Michigan, matters to New York, et cetera. So this is what we're attempted to do, to show that. Same in Mexico. You see it goes all the way to the southern states in Mexico as well. Next slide. Then one of the key things that we did as part of the border master plan was really to identify the key issues and needs, and we kind of broke this up into two components. So the left-hand side is what we call cross-cutting issues, and then the right-hand side is kind of more performance-based issues and needs. So I'll walk through a couple of them quickly. On the cutting-edge issues, you heard a lot about coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. That continues to be an issue that we'll have to work on to address. The pandemic showed really kind of why that is so important, because when it happened, who was in charge? How were we coordinating between the two countries? Who was talking to who, and all of those, what policies, the policies aligned or not. So that is really a big component of, I think, the challenges moving forward is, how can we collectively develop a framework with Mexico and all the key players, US and Mexico, all the key players, on how to better collaborate to be able to address issues moving forward. Then the other one I want to touch on is data collection sharing. One of the biggest issues we had with the border master plan was really finding data. A lot of good data on the US side, but not similar on the Mexican side. So how do we address that? How do we move forward with that? And then also integrating technologies. There's not really a systematic effort to address and improve and implement technologies at the border crossings. If you compare our border crossing with the northern border crossings, they're much more advanced in technology deployment. So how do we do that? So those are some of the kind of cross-cutting issues, and the others, as you can see here, disruptions. We heard a lot from BTEC and all the other members, disruptions from COVID, disruptions from, immigrant issues, disruption from weather events, et cetera. How do we address those? And then kind of the key system performance issues. Secretary Hughes talked about border delays, border crossing, wait times, et cetera, congestion issues, not just at the highways, but also at the rail crossings, connectivity issues between border regions, border crossings, connectivity between the different modes, so that you have a lot of mixed issues and things that really are impacting, the movement of people and goods, issues that we really need to work on to address. Next slide. So the next few slides, is the analysis we did in terms of looking at, border crossing, border wait times. And here it's a little busy, but we looked at each of the border crossings. We're looking to what the crossing times will be today versus 2050. And really it's, it's interesting. And again, this is do nothing. So if we do nothing today, the 2019, those are actual. Then the 2050, that is projected. So I'll give you one example. I'm trying to see which one from the region. Really when you look at it, you're looking at, border wait time, adding about, several hours in terms of border crossing time. This is for commercial vehicles. And again, this is probably the most important one when you look at it in terms of, the amount of the forecasted amount of time that will cost for somebody to cross. So next slide. This one again, we're showing, the different border crossings. So this one is personal vehicles. The one I showed you earlier was commercial vehicles, which is trucks. And again, for personal vehicles, the wait time is not as dramatic, but as you can see, every single border crossing will have additional wait time by 2050 added to whatever it is today. Next slide. And again, this is, we kind of broke this up into several. So this is, again, just showing you average crossing time today, and then average crossing time in 2050 through all the border crossings. And again, the key message here is you do nothing. These are some of the hours that you will see on top of what we already see today. Next slide. So what are the impacts of border delays and congestion that I showed you in the few slides before? So you do nothing. Today, what that shows is that we're looking at $68.3 million in economic productivity losses, or a reduction in GDP of $2.3 billion. That's 2019. So when we go to 2050, do nothing today, and in 2050, you're looking at doubling that to $4.4 billion in 2050, and a reduction in GDP of over $116 billion for both countries. So when you look at it, really, the challenge for Texas, for US, for Mexico, the border regions, is how can we collectively work together to address these issues by improving the transportation infrastructure at the border crossings, at the corridors, at the rail crossings, to be able to minimize the impact caused by border delays and congestion on the movement of people and goods. So I think that's really some of the key issues we're trying to highlight here. Next slide. So the next couple of slides, really now we're going into the recommendations. So you heard me talk about some of the key issues, the key needs, border delays, border wait time, economic impact. So what we did was now start crafting recommendations, and there's three-pronged approach in the recommendations. The first one is outlining policy recommendations. Then I'll talk about program recommendations, and finally the project recommendations. So with the policy recommendations, we broke it into three buckets because they're a little bit different. System-wide, I mentioned earlier, some of the key issues is how do we deal with coordination, partnership, collaboration, economic competitiveness issues. The other thing is integration of new technologies. So we have system-wide policy recommendations in these key areas, as you see here. Then border crossings are unique. So they kind of require a different set of policies to address, when I say mobility and reliability, these operational issues at the border crossings. And that includes things like border wait times, includes staffing, includes other things like managing the actual facilities themselves. And then system capacity. Okay, some of the border crossings are at or beyond capacity. So they're already, what we have today, they're already at capacity. But then there are border crossings that are also under capacity. How do you address that? Safety and security from a border crossing is a little bit different than safety and security from a corridor crossing. Funding is a big issue for border crossings. And then really just managing those assets that we have so they can be in good condition. Then the corridor side, this really includes both highway and rail for the most part. And then we'll talk about some of the key issues, key policy issues that we have to grapple with, again, is the mobility and reliability. Are we operating what we got today and maximize the capacity of that network? But also, where do we need to add capacity? In you guys' case, for instance, I-10 is a key issue where, one, you need to improve operations, but two, you need to add capacity on I-10. Connectivity. first and last mile. Some of the biggest issues that we saw around the border region is the last mile connectivity. A truck comes from the border crossing and it's going to warehousing. How does that road network looks like, but also connectivity between modes, and then connectivity between border crossings, and then connectivity, you know, to other regions as well. So those are some of the big corridor policy recommendations that you see in the plan. Next slide. And on the program recommendations, here again, we also broke it up into 3 key components. We have border crossings, we have corridors, and also we have program areas just for corridors, then the ones that are for border crossings and corridors. So I won't go into details, but as you can see here, on the border crossing side, one of the key program areas is how can we reduce border crossing and delays for moving people, but also how can we provide better information to those crossing the border on wait times, etc., but also educating the public. I want to stress that one of the things we uncovered was that a lot of people don't really understand the border. They hear things on the news, so how do we educate them? But it's not just the general public, elected officials as well. Throughout Texas, throughout the United States, so they can understand what the border means to them. And then, you know, some of the other things on the corridor side, again, I mentioned already, but, you know, how do we strengthen those networks? Because the entire system, as I showed earlier, the multimodal system is what helps facilitate the movement of people and goods, and they all have to work holistically and comprehensively together as a system to facilitate the efficient and safe movement of people and goods, not just across the border, but points beyond. So those are some of the things that we're looking here on the program recommendations. Next slide. So this is the project recommendations I mentioned, you know, kind of the 3-legged stool: policy, program, and project. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. And I apologize, we didn't update this slide from commission, but right now we do have 651 projects at a cost of $37.3 billion. And you see the numbers here. Really what's important to note is that 54% of the projects are mobility and reliability. So that's addressing a lot of issues on operations, you know, reliability, but also capacity. And then connectivity, as you see here, you have 20% of projects addressing connectivity issues. So that's really a huge issue. And then multimodal movement, you're looking at 15% of projects addressing that, and then the others addressing safety. And what I wanted to point out here is that when you look at the $37.3 billion, you know, there are over 441 projects out of these that are unfunded. We only have about 183 projects that are fully funded. So that's the challenge here. You have almost a shortfall of $31.3 billion that are not funded right now. And that's really, I think, the key message here is that we identified projects, what needs to be done to address the issues that have been identified, but the challenge will continue to find funding to implement the projects identified in the border master plan, because the border master plan, unfortunately, doesn't come with funding. There's no dedicated funding for any of the projects in the border master plan, other than the traditional funding programs and sources that the project sponsors already have. Next slide. So this slide just shows you, with any plan, we have to talk about implementation. So this slide shows you what projects have been identified to be implemented in the short, medium, and long term. And then it also shows you by country. So the first one is the Texas side. We have 554 projects, and you know, an estimated cost of $32.68 billion. But like I mentioned earlier, 25.17 billion of that is unfunded. And then similar on the Mexican side, they have fewer projects, But I think the interesting thing on the Mexican side, majority of their projects are unfunded. One, because Mexico has a different funding cycle, funding framework than we do. So theirs, they don't fund projects on a 10-year increment like we do, or 5-year increment. It's more of a yearly funding cycle. So the numbers on the Mexican side certainly shows a much bigger, gap. Next slide. So, finally, one of the big, element of the plan is once the plan is finished and adopted by the commission, what next? So this is really looking into implementation, and there's several items that we highlight here. And really a big one is that the partnership between Texas and Mexico needs to continue in order to be able to fulfill the vision of the border master plan, but also investing in border transportation infrastructure. Commitment needs to be made by federal, state, local, regional, and private sector to really advance the recommendations to the border master plan, and the continued engagement of not just BTAC, but all the border stakeholders that are being involved in the border master plan is going to be crucial to moving forward with the BTMP. And then really, focusing, we've spent a lot of time, 2 years developing the plan, and now really it's time to start moving forward with an implementation mind frame. Next slide. So next steps, Secretary Hughes mentioned earlier that we will be, going to commission, but right now we're conducting the public comment period. We did open that back in, I think, January 24th, and we're closing that out next week. And immediately we hope to finalize the plan and present it to commission for consideration and adoption during the March 25th meeting. So that's kind of the next steps in terms of the border master plan development. Next slide. That concludes my presentation, and Madam Chair and Eduardo will be more than happy to entertain any questions that the policy board may have.
Caroline, thank you
Yes.
so much for that excellent presentation. What I'd like to do is now open it up for questions or comments by the policy board members.
Sure, thank you.
I
Ma-
see
Madam
Senator
Chair?
Blanco has his hand up. Senator Blanco? You're muted
Madam-
right now.
Is that better?
Yes, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
One day I'll get it right. Well, thank you, Chairwoman Ortega. I appreciate the opportunity, and good morning to everyone. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First of all, thank you, Caroline, for such an important presentation. I want to thank Secretary Hughes for joining us today and for your leadership. Once we get past this pandemic, I'd like to invite you to El Paso to see the amazing things that are really happening in our community. I just want to express my support for the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan, and really want to thank BTAC for serving as the steering committee. Obviously, Secretary Hughes's leadership as chair of BTAC, it has been instrumental, and you've done such a phenomenal job. I also want to thank TxDOT for undertaking this huge effort to better facilitate cross-border trade and really improve transportation infrastructure, and to increase that coordination with public officials, not only on our side of the border, but also with our public officials in Mexico. I think it's essential that Texas coordinates with Mexico when planning transportation programs along our southern border. The plan that we have, I think, demonstrates the importance of the border in economic development at the national level, at the state level as well as the local level. And as we all saw in Caroline's presentation, our region, the Texas-Mexico border region, generated $350 billion in annual GDP as of 2019, and trade through the border represents 5.3% of Texas GDP. Additionally, census data demonstrates that over the last 30 years, the borders region, our population has increased by 70% to 7.4 million people that are working in our region, has nearly doubled. You know, and just, you know, to put a local flavor to it, El Paso, in keeping with its name, serves as a critical international passageway. In 2018, the El Paso Port of Entry accounted for 20% of land port trade and about $81.9 billion. And millions of people, as we saw, as Caroline had presented, millions of these people rely on crossing the border to access for education, whether it's here at UTEP, EPCC, or Texas Tech, healthcare and retail services. You know, that movement of people and goods is forecasted to grow exponentially. And in areas such as, specifically in areas such as automotive and in electronics, medical technologies and manufacturing. And over the next 30 years, I think the number of commercial vehicles are going to increase crossing into the U.S. from Mexico, and it's expected to triple. And that's really going to just generate I think a huge economic benefit for our region, and that's such a great thing. But it's also going to put additional stress on our transportation infrastructure, and it's stress that you know, these roads are already under pressure. Crossing times for vehicles and people are already unacceptably high, and we've made investments in things like you know, ITS, Intelligent Transportation System, to help modernize El Paso ports of entry to increase trade and traffic and reduce those wait times. And we need to continue to invest in our border transportation infrastructure. We've got to continue to find ways to reduce wait times to protect and enhance our state's economic and social interests in our southern border. And that's going to require collaboration and coordination with entities and organizations, both here in the United States and in Mexico. And we've got to reduce the border delays. We've got to expand rail cargo processing capabilities, improve border data collection, and expand regional connectivity around Texas-Mexico border. So I encourage TxDOT to work with everyone to ensure that Texas aggressively invests in the programs recommended in the Border Transportation Master Plan. I always know that you know, our delegation is here to help. We're here to help move forward with those recommendations, and we look forward to moving our region from El Paso to Brownsville in a positive direction. So I want to thank Caroline for the great work that you have done, as well as Secretary Hughes for your leadership in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I see County Judge Ricardo Samaniego. His hand is up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Carolyn Mace, thank you so much. And especially, you know, you captured a lot of things that we're really wanting everyone to understand about us, this uniqueness and, you know, the paradigm shifts of people walking versus passing by. And of course, I want to welcome Secretary Hughes. You know, I'll start by thanking you for, you know, taking time to meet with us today. And I have to say, you know, your resume extremely impressive, but anything that has border on it, is really, just music to our ears. I can tell you that understanding the border is just not easy. We're myself born and raised here in El Paso, and it's a complicated matter. But when you have those kinds of opportunities and being part of this meeting today, it's just exceptional for us. And I want to be, frankly speaking, we do not have always do not have the opportunity to engage and have people of your caliber to really sit at the table with us and really try to understand. So this is, to me, a very unique opportunity to have you here in this particular meeting. This is a community that I can tell you, I'd like for you to know a little bit about us, and I want to take advantage of because people don't really take their time and don't get to know us completely. I just want you to indulge just for a few minutes to know a little bit about who we are. This is a community that kindly and generously, accommodated 150,000 refugees that passed through our community just a few years ago, and has already begun months of preparing for a new migrant movement of patiently waiting asylum seekers that will initiate this weekend, just starting today, because of these new policies. This is a community that experienced a horrific tragedy on August 3rd of 2019 and bounced back with dignity, and I can tell you, tremendous amount of dignity, and we really share this idea, or cherish the idea of being called El Paso Strong. This is a community that recently experienced one of the most intense pandemic spikes, and we addressed it squarely and without sometimes a lot of cooperation in our orders, but we were able to do that. We surpassed any COVID testing success of any county in Texas. Our testing has been incredible, testing for the virus. And now we're leading in the vaccine distribution. So we're extremely proud of the fact of how we do things. Having said that, our claim for uniqueness includes a rare collaboration that you will find in our entire community. And I hope that you have the confidence of understanding who we are so that we can get that kind of support and know that we'll respond accordingly. Starting off with our passionate and dedicated state representatives, we are honored to have our state representative, Lina Ortega, as our chair, as you can see, with her vast, tremendous amount of experience in transportation. We have our newly elected state senator representative that you heard from, Senator Blanco, who also sat on the House of Representatives. We're honored to have Speaker Pro Tem of the House, Joe Moody, which is quite an honor to have that kind of state representation. And so very honored to have that. We have individuals like Representative Mary Gonzalez, who, if you speak about anything having to do with rural, she is that person that we go to. And so that to us, it's an extremely favorable situation that we have at this time. So we also just want to just sort of highlight that we have our opportunity to have individuals that like Representative Claudia Ordaz, who happens to be married to a former commissioner and also was part of the the chair of this particular board, extremely able to have that kind of representation. We have Art Fierro, who represents anything having to do with education and anything having to be an advocate of our community. And of course, we have on our board that we have an incredible, our illustrious Mayor Leeser, who's been a mayor of El Paso prior to recently, winning the election, and who has shown a tremendous amount of collaboration with county government, which I think is essential. I think you will find that we get a lot of accolades about the relationship that we now have with governments, and so that this is also quite an opportunity for us. We have our Congresswoman, Veronica Escobar, who herself has been a county judge. And of course, our director, Eduardo Calvo, whose experience and background with TxDOT has been incredible. And so we know that it's invaluable to have someone that has that kind of a team that he has. We are very honored and truly care about all the people and the future of El Paso, and he has shown and his team has shown they understand that. I also would like to highlight our uniqueness clearly includes a superb collaboration relationship with TxDOT. I truly want to thank Tomas, Eddie, and Jennifer for their dedication and commitment to our community. But finally, our regional connectivity with New Mexico and the state of Chihuahua is commendable, and the result of many years of dealing with the same challenges of being isolated. As you well know, El Paso, Juarez, and Las Cruces have tremendous amount of miles between us and our capitals. So that's why we work so well together. We have a very successful symbiotic relationship in every dimension of our community. In case in point, in my case, 25 years of my career have been with Mexican enterprises in Mexico and the United States, including 10 years with a maquiladora and over 5 years in mental health agencies in New Mexico. And so that sort of shows a case in point of how we deal in this symbiotic relationship. And finally, so I won't take up too much of your time, I really want to talk a little bit about what really catches my eye as far as what we're having to do here today. I-10 is the front door of Texas and a critical freight corridor. Because of our unique geography, we not only have a state and international border, but we also have a big mountain that limits our options for alternatives. It is the only direct route through our city, and every international bridge leads into I-10, whether in Far East El Paso County or next door in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. All those billions in international trade make their way to I-10 to El Paso before heading to Dallas, Houston, or other parts of the state. All of us in El Paso MPO, the county, the city, and leading civic organizations are on the same page with regard to our transportation priorities. This single voice has finally allowed our message, and I hope, to be heard loud and clear. We have our priorities established and have a clear plan. We just need equitable funding in order to execute projects that are critical to our infrastructure as we support the health of the state's economy. The Border Master Plan establishes the positive impact of Texas-Mexican border to local communities, state of Texas, and actually the entire nation. The goods that cross our border go everywhere in the U.S., and as you said, 68% of all trade between U.S. and Mexico goes through Texas. Once again, reiterating, the El Paso region has 3 listed bridges under the border crossing time, the Bridge of the Americas and Isleta Zaragoza Bridge. We also border the Santa Teresa crossing in New Mexico. If there are no improvements to the area, we're looking to anywhere from 4 to 7 hours of delay in the future when it comes to crossing times. The figures that were provided to us, 68.3 billion in productivity losses, is enormous. We should not accept the probability of sustaining a severe economic loss by 2050 of 4.4 billion. It is time to take action, as you all know. We need to reduce the border crossing delays for goods as well as people. For the El Paso community needs state assistance in order to continue to make positive impact across the state. So I truly encourage you, Secretary Hughes, that you continue to engage with us, that you continue to understand who we are and our uniqueness. We're very excited about this relationship that we have with Mexico and New Mexico. We're very excited with the caliber of individuals that partake and are able to accommodate anything that you can give us and going our way. Once again, please learn a lot more about us. I think you're going to find an incredible community. I've always said to know us is to love us, and I really mean that with all my heart. And I think everyone in here, you have some incredible people in this board, from city representatives, our own Commissioner Holguin. I've got individuals from the county as well, and the city, incredible mayors that we meet quite periodically to continue. So once again, I think on behalf, and I know on behalf of our mayor and myself, we welcome you to this meeting and encourage you to continue to know what we're all about. Understanding this uniqueness is going to be a huge component into being able to support us. So once again, thank you for taking time. Also, Ms. Mace, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you, Judge. I see another hand raised, and I believe it's Mayor Leeser who's next.
Yeah, I just want to thank Secretary Hughes for attending and Ms. Mace for a great presentation. And we really appreciate you being here and learning about our community. And I'm not sure that the county judge left anything off since I wrote the speech for him. So I want to thank you all for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other policy board member that would like to speak? Okay, I see no other hands raised, so I'd like to make a few comments before we open it up, because I know that there are public members that have signed up to speak. I also want to join in personally thanking you, Secretary Hughes, for taking the time to join us during our policy board meeting and to address the border master plan. I know that there's been an enormous amount of time that you have put in, as well as TxDOT and all of the members that help facilitate the plan, and to really show and highlight the importance of the Texas border to the state of Texas and to the rest of the country. It also shows on the last slides that were being discussed how important it is to find sustainable funding that is necessary for the border infrastructure projects that are needed here in El Paso, but as well along the border and in our other communities. And what I guess drew me was that based on all this careful research information that's provided, how it would economically hurt our state because of these huge, enormous, tremendous potential revenue losses, that if nothing is done to actually fund these necessary infrastructure projects, I think that the state needs to make sure that our borders are open to commerce. As was pointed out, we know that the majority of U.S. trade is handled by the Texas-Mexican border, and that it brings billions in annual GDP, and it also creates millions of jobs. My biggest concern is that we need to have a dedicated monies to support the 100+ projects that are not currently funded in Texas. And based on the numbers presented, that's an estimated cost of over $30 billion. We also know that there are other problems that have been identified in the report on infrastructure if it's not put in place, such as air quality, safety, congestion. Years ago, the Texas Transportation Commission created a Category 12 funding for what is now known as Texas Clear Lanes, and that was specifically done to deal with problems of congestion. I think we all know that this specific type of dedicated funding has been very successful in order to help with congestion and pollution. I believe at this point, based on this plan, this report, that Texas needs to set up a similar dedicated pocket of monies to have the resources available to fund any of the necessary projects that will help our state, the state of Texas, to continue to lead in trade. I'm also aware that there's going to be some federal funding that's going to be made available to the states for infrastructure and economic development. And I would suspect that this would include trade. Potentially part of this funding can be used for a dedicated funding source. But I think now that we have this report and this fantastic report that shows the importance of the border, I think that the state at this point needs to find a dedicated source to fund the necessary infrastructure projects, and the state has to be creative and explore all available avenues of funding. So again, thank you. At this time, since there are no other board members that would like to speak, I'd like to have Marisol go ahead and open it up now for public for the public to provide comments or questions.
Yes, we have David Coronado signed up for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Coronado, if you could proceed.
Hi, good morning, Chair, TPB members. My name is David Coronado. I'm with the City of El Paso Generation Bridges Department, and I'm also a member of BTAC, along with Eduardo Calvo, representing El Paso in Austin. For the last several months, we've been working with Caroline and Secretary Hughes on this plan. We're happy to reach this point. We're almost completed with the plan and ready to move into the next phase of this study. And so, at the City of El Paso, we recognize how important our bridges are to our region. Historically, the bridges have been neglected in the past, for decades, really. And that has led to a lot of these issues that are discussed in this plan in terms of capacity constraints, staffing shortages, wait times, lack of infrastructure. But over the last 6 years, the City of El Paso has made a lot of investments in the bridge system. We have additional staffing that helps us in terms of analytics and project development. We also created a bridge steering committee that is essential for coordination efforts. Many of them actually were really involved in the plan and developing this plan, working with Caroline and the consultants for this effort. And we also have developed a comprehensive CIP at all our bridges in our region and identify needs not only in El Paso, but also in Juarez. So it's a truly binational CIP of projects and improvements that are needed in our region. One of those projects on the CIP is the investment of $32 million that our state delegation, many of you in this call will helped us secure this funding. And right now we're working with TxDOT to finalize the agreements that are going to allow the city to access these dollars and invest in more technology and data analytics and collection of more data to help modernize these ports of entry in our region. Before the pandemic started, we were able to conduct a cross-border survey so we could better understand the patterns in the movement of people between El Paso and Juarez. And from this survey, we found that 94% of bridge crossings in our region are from people who live here in El Paso and Juarez in the area, who commute back and forth on a daily basis to just go about their daily lives, go to school, go to work, go to the doctor. And so this data shows us that how interconnected we truly are between Juarez and El Paso. We also have now more data on how wait times, the exchange rate, violence in Juarez and other factors impact these crossings. And so once this pandemic ends, we want to be able to restart this project because it helps us with more information that we didn't have before. It's one-of-a-kind study, and also helps us inform our efforts at the city and for the entire region. So having said all that, this border master plan really helps us show the areas of needs and what the issues are that we are, need to tackle in our bridge to improve our bridge system. And we are committed to working with TxDOT, with all the stakeholders in the region, as we move from this planning phase into the implementation phase of this study. And so we plan on competing with the other border regions to secure funding that we need to address our needs here in the region in terms of mobility, reliability, and the ports of entry. And so again, with that, thank you all for giving us a chance to speak on this item. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Coronado. Marisol, who's next?
Yes, I have Cecilia Levine.
Good morning. Thank you
morning.
very much, Eduardo, for inviting me to participate today and to be part of this incredible presentation. Madam Chairman, thank you also, and board members of the MPO, thank you very much. Welcome, Secretary Hughes, to our beautiful region of El Paso, Juarez. I'm speaking as a private sector member that has been 35 years in the maquiladora industry and that has been using the border crossings for all that time. I am also speaking as the president of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Strategic Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that is working on making sure that this region gets not forgotten in the area of a social ecosystem. One of the important projects that are in the front always is how do we make this region more fluid? And we have looked at projects that are being used in the northern a part of the United States and Canada that have shown good results, which is an integrated, comprehensive system that can help if we had an integrated system between Mexico and the U.S. Between the border from Tornillo all the way to Santa Teresa. I know the private sector, the industry, would collaborate in participating in a system like that could be sustainable as well, because we could now increase the number of crossings and not have to tap into much funding. We also would love to see also the fact that we cross a lot of people in the downtown bridge, and we walk them. People from out of town, people that come and see the potential of investing in our community. And I'm talking about our community is Paso Juarez. We bring CEOs from all over the world. They have at times mentioned that we have antiquated border crossings, which hurts me a lot as a citizen that loves this region. I would love to continue working with TechStock, EPMPO, and the Bridge Committee of the city to see how we can look at fun.
Thank you, Ms. Levine. Your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you very much.
Marisol?
Yes, and I have Mr. David Jerome.
Okay, Mr. Jerome?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's excellent to see the MPO members today, and thank you for your service. I also want to welcome to the El Paso virtual stage, obviously, our guest, Secretary of State Hughes. So thank you for being here today. I'm David Jerome with the Chamber. I represent 1,400 businesses here in El Paso. And let me also just stipulate too, to everything that was said already, especially by our elected officials. And if I might, at one point, I may reach out to you, Mr. Mayor, to get some help on speeches, just as an aside. But I thought those were terrific comments across the board. And it's worth noting that at the Chamber, we discuss the bridges, I think, almost every day. And we have regular meetings every single month with our sister chambers in Juarez. And we discuss the bridges in every meeting we have with them. And I guess this clearly illustrates that the bridges are vital to business, especially as we seek to rebuild our economy. And I think that's an important note to have in this conversation, that we are going to need these bridges to function as we recover from COVID-19. An additional point I would like to make that was covered in your excellent presentation, I might add, is that we'd like to seek that we all remember as we work going forward the importance of the transportation infrastructure that does connect these bridges to the rest of our economy, especially I-10 and its connecting and supporting thoroughfares and roads. So clearly, business sees this effort as critical, and I want to applaud it. And I also want to thank you again to the MPO members for hosting this, and for our Secretary of State for giving us this time today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jerome. Marisol, any other members of the public?
No, nobody else signed up, ma'am.
All right, now, this is raised. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to point out that the restructuring of the bridges took place several years ago that brought on planners, economists, and a Lean Six Sigma project that then developed a plan that we presented to the state delegation for that $32 million in order to automate the bridges. To Ms. Levine's comments, I just wanted to respond to her comments because she makes a very good point in terms of how we do need to automate the bridges. But the most important part that came out of that process was that we treat the bridge system as all one unit now, and that was possible because of all the stakeholder input. And lastly, I want to recognize the state delegation for obtaining that $32 million for us. We're in the process of securing those actual dollars from TxDOT. That's the process that we have in place. I know that the delegation has been intimately involved. Madam Chairman, I want to recognize your efforts. I know that you're on very powerful committees. That would be very helpful for us in order to be able to start releasing those funds and get started on those projects.
Thank you. Are there any other policy board members that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. I don't see anybody else. Is that correct, Marisol? All right. Eduardo, I believe now that we have concluded then with item 8. And again, Secretary Hughes, we are very grateful for having you join us this morning. And I see your hands being raised right now.
If I may briefly, I apologize for taking so much of your agenda's time, but I just I think that the comments that were made were so impressive, and we really cannot overstate what the El Paso community has been through, particularly in the last few years. Judge Samaniego, I understand we have not had a chance to meet in person, but I promise I have spent as much time as possible in El Paso. It's a community that I truly value, and have really enjoyed working with all of the leadership in your community, and look forward to working with you all on a continuing basis. Senator Blanco, I appreciate your participation in BTAC meetings. It's not really a public forum. It's really where we sit and we get the work done. And yet all of the representation and leadership in El Paso often participates, and we're very grateful for that. I want to reiterate in closing how important it is that we are in the middle of public comments, and those public comments will contribute to the finalization of the plan. And so Caroline and her team will be looking closely at those comments and incorporating any changes or any notes that need to be considered based on the information in those comments. So please take this opportunity to review the plan and to share your comments during this open comment period. And again, the last time I was in El Paso was unfortunately last year. I wish it would have been sooner for the Sister Cities summit that I was very fortunate to get to be a part of. And I really like that not only do we get things done, which is really just the Texan way, but I feel like El Pasoans really get them done con ganas, and I really, really appreciate all the energy, all the hard work, and all the dedication of everyone in the El Paso community. So please share with us your comments, and please continue to reach out, and know that while we may be far away, we're actually a very convenient plane ride away, and one that I'm always so grateful to take. So I hope to be back in your community as soon as circumstances permit. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calvo, I believe, wants to say something.
Yeah, just want to, in closing, thank you again, Secretary. I mean, for your leadership in BTAC. I mean, it's been already said, but I do want to also thank my fellow BTAC members for the work that we put in, and our Mexican counterparts as well that participated in that. Caroline and the consultant team for being very receptive to the comments that we provided, and I know that we did provide a lot of comments, and there was a very good amount of exchange, and I really appreciate all that. And just to close, I mean the plan is highlighting a lot of the strategies that we need to move forward, and it's very clear that there isn't one single silver bullet. Yes, we're going to need capacity, absolutely, new bridges, new crossings, expansions, but at the same time, we're also going to need to improve connections to and from these crossings. If not, it doesn't help. At the same time, we need the coordination with the federal agencies. We can build all the bridges and lanes, but if CBP and aduanas don't do their part, so it's not one single thing that we need to do. It's a multitude of things. And just to stress what our chair just mentioned, Representative Ortega, it's all about funding. We need to find that dedicated funding at the federal level, at the state level. And this document is really helping us to initiate those conversations and to tailor it to the different audiences. Again, whether it's at the federal level with Congress, at the state level with the legislature, with TxDOT, whoever it is. But now we have that a lot of really good information to use. So again, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to speak, and thanks to the team.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
All right, Mr. Calvo. Eduardo, we should now go back to item 3 on the agenda. If you
Okay.
proceed.
Okay, all right. So item 3 is a discussion and action to approve recommendations from the Executive Committee 2. The item is regarding the Kemp Smith Legal Services Agreement entered into April 2nd, 2019. A, that the legal services agreement be amended to increase the maximum yearly payment amount by an additional amount of $3,500 for the current term, and that the executive director be allowed to take all actions necessary to effectuate the increase to the legal services agreement. And B, that pursuant to the terms of the legal services agreement, the El Paso MPO exercise its option to extend the term of the agreement for an additional 1-year term from April 1, 2021 to March 31, 2022, with the additional recommendation that the agreement be amended to increase the maximum yearly payment from $29,200 to $35,000, and that the executive director be allowed to take all actions necessary to effectuate the renewal of the agreement and the amendment to the maximum payable amount.
Okay. I would like to separate those items on consideration. So at this time, is there a motion to consider item 3A on the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
This is Walter Miller, second.
All right. So then at this time, I'd like discussion on the item. Mr. Calvo?
Right. So what we presented this to the executive committee, and one of the questions that that came out is if there was sufficient funds to increase this maximum, and I think we showed the financial health of the MPO that we can afford it. That's one thing. A second thing that I'd also as staff, we want to make the recommendation to do this in general terms. I think Kemp Smith and very specifically Sergio Estrada has done a great job. So I think staff recommends the approval of item 3A.
And so did the executive committee recommend the approval. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, just this is Judge Samaniego. I just wanted to let you know I will be abstaining my vote. My daughter works at, although she is extremely away from anything that Sergio does and really more into the insurance area of law, she is with Kemp Smith, and although I'm very proud of her, and I'll say that right now, I would have to abstain just to make sure there isn't any issues with that. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Judge. Is there anybody opposed to the motion on item 3A?
Madam Chair, this
Yes.
is Representative Lizarga. I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. So their rate went up, is that what happened?
No, go ahead, Eduardo.
No, actually, it was the number of hours that they have been spending. Again, if you recall, when that contract was initiated almost 2 years ago, that was before my time. Honestly, I don't really know how the dollar amount and the number of hours was estimated. But what we did is that we went back to the 22 months that we've had that contract and got an average of all the hours that they've been working so that we could forecast what would be needed for the next 2 months. And it's a relatively small amount compared to the service that we're getting. So as staff, we felt very comfortable recommending that increase to the executive committee, and of course the committee agreed with that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Calvo.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, with regard going back to the vote, is there any opposition to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, and with Judge Samaniego not voting, it passes unanimously. We can now take up for consideration 3B on our agenda. Is there a motion to consider item 3B?
Madam Chair, this is Walter Miller. I would move to consider and approve item 3B of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Coswell?
Again, regarding the renewal, staff recommends renewing or exercising the option to renew for that third year. And on the dollar amount, similar to item 3A, we took the average of the 22 months that we've been working on and then extended it for 12 months to see what the dollar amount would be. It was a little bit less than 35, but again, the 35, the executive committee agreed that let's increase a ceiling. This is a maximum. Doesn't mean that we're going to spend the whole thing, but just to cover ourselves and without having the need to come back to the policy board and in case we were running, or reaching that maximum. So with it, again, staff was very comfortable making that recommendation to the executive committee.
Okay. And the contract is going to expire, if I recall correctly, at the beginning of March?
No, it goes through the end of March.
The end of March.
Right. So we will renew it for a third year starting April 1st or whenever the anniversary is.
Okay. And then just to add, the contract was a 2-year contract, so it's going to expire at the end of March. The contract itself provides that it could be renewed for a 2-year period, 1 year at a time, and that is why the recommendation that was made by the MPO as well as considered by the executive committee was to go ahead and renew this contract because, as everybody knows, Sergio has done an excellent job for the MPO. So at this time, are there any questions with regard to item 3B on the agenda? I don't believe I see any questions or hands raised other than the judge. Judge Samaniego?
I think I just left my hand up when I was.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. All right. So if there are no questions, then I'd like to go ahead and vote on item 3B. Again, anybody opposed to the motion that's being considered right now? Seeing no opposition, then the motion passes. And we can now move on to item 4.
Okay. Items 4 through 7 are discussion and action to approve recommendations from the Transportation Project Advisory Committee. 2, and this is item 4, amend the Destino 2045 MTP, amend the Destino 2045 MTP, Destino 2019-2023 TIP, and Destino 2021-2024 TIP to program the Industrial Avenue Grade Separation Project using Federal Railroad Administration Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, RISI, program funds in fiscal year 2021.
Okay. Mr. Calvo, do you want to take them together as far as separately?
Let's do them separately, ma'am.
I'd like to go ahead and see if there's a motion on item 4 on our agenda to consider.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Walter Miller. I would move to only consider this item and not offer an opinion yet. So I would move to consider this item.
Is there a second to consider?
Second, Lizárraga.
Thank you. Now we can go ahead and Eduardo, you can discuss it and present it to us.
Right. So we're having the TPAC vice chair. Typically, the chair presents this But in his absence, the vice chair, Jose Landeros, will make the brief presentation, and staff will support with any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calvo, and good morning, Chairwoman Ortega, members of the board. Jose Landeros with the Transportation Project Advisory Committee and with El Paso County. The item before you was unanimously recommended for approval by TPAC to the board this morning. This is the introduction of a new project into our planning documents. Doña Ana County is a sponsoring agent for this project, which would is a design-only project that would introduce a grade separation or some sort of bridge introduction along Industrial Avenue, which is near the Doña Ana County Airport, and would support a safer roadway for motorists, as there is a current UP railroad line that runs through the area that can introduce traffic and congestion because of weights as rail moves through the area. And additionally, it's just a safer project. So this is a design project that is being introduced into our planning documents. And again, TPAC recommended this unanimously, and both I and staff are available to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. I don't see any hands raised. So at this point, let's take Mr. Miller. Do you want to move to approve the item?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move to approve this motion.
All right.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second to approve. Is any further discussion? Hearing none, then is there anybody that is opposed to the approval of this item? Seeing none, it passes. Item 5.
Item 5 is to amend the Destino 2045 MTP, amend the Destino 2045 MTP to amend the Borderland Expressway project to update the limits and project name in fiscal year 2029.
Mr. Landeros.
Thank you again, Chairwoman and members of the board. Jose Landeros with Transportation Project Advisory Committee. The item before you is really an administrative amendment to the existing project in the MPO planning documents. The updated limits are just being restated. If you look at the language in the agenda item, it's really effectively just flipping them from the northern to south and south to north. So, but the project remains the same, and the name is also being updated in the planning documents. And TPAC again recommended this unanimously, and both I and staff are available for questions that the board may have.
Okay. Any questions? There's one. Ms. Lizarraga, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just wondering, I'm just curious, I don't think I saw in the backup, why are they changing the name?
Yeah, I will know Mr. Trevino is available, or Mr. Calvo, who can provide a little bit of insight as to why TxDOT as a sponsoring agency is proposing the update.
Oh, I can take that quickly. So what the limits themselves are not changing. What is changing is a description of the same limit. One of the changes is that, for TxDOT it has a convention of stating the limits. I think it's from north to south, and we had them reversed. So it really doesn't make a big deal. But it's more of a cleanup thing, and to make sure that the description of the limits matches the TxDOT systems and all of our documents and all that. So it's cleanup, basically.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm not sure, Mr. Miller, do you have a question? Because I was
going to move to approve this agenda item.
All right, if there are no other questions, then I take your motion to approve. Is there a second?
Rivera, second.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further discussion, at this time I'd like to go ahead and vote. Is there anybody opposed to approval of item 5 on the agenda? Hearing no opposition, the item passes. Item 6.
Item 6 is to adopt the State of Texas and the State of New Mexico Performance Measure 1, 2021 Safety Targets.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second, Palacios.
Thank you. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, we can go ahead and vote. Any opposition? Motion passes. Item 7.
Item 7 is to adopt the draft goals and objectives for RMS 2050 MTP.
All right. Any questions? Hearing none, a motion to approve?
Excuse me, is there a presentation on this item?
Is there?
Yes, yes, we do have presentation.
Okay.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I would move that if we could move to consider this item and until after the presentation.
That's we can go ahead and at this stage, there had been a previous motion to consider all of these items, but to vote on them individually. So I think we can go ahead and proceed with the presentation.
Very good, thank you.
All right, yep. We have a presentation that will be led by Sonia Perez of MPO staff. And again, this is an important piece of the development of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So Sonia, take it away.
Yes, good morning. This is Sonia Perez. Can you all hear me? Let's check.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to start with a brief recap of the work that has been done for the development of the RMS 2050 MTP before going over the goals and objectives. Can you move to the next slide, please? This is a summary of what has been presented to you all at the TPB meetings. So in March of 2020, we had a kickoff that introduced the development of the MTP. In April, we presented a report on the steps that were going to be taken for this development. In May, there was a call for projects that was from May 11th through June 22nd. And also a report on the demographics and the DeFi process that was going to initiate for the development of the travel demand model. In June of 2020, we invited the public and everybody for the online visioning workshops that were going to start or be conducted from June 14 through July 19. In August, we came back with the public feedback, a report that was presented by Asian TV after the visioning workshops and survey. In September, we presented the weights for the decision length criteria and were adopted by the board. In May 2020 and from May through January of 2021, there has been a report on the travel demand model development. And today we would like to present for adoption of the goals and the objectives for the RMS 2050 MTP. Next slide, please. In addition, as part of the performance-based planning requirements, this is a list of the recently developed documents or analyses that will be incorporated into the development of the goals, objectives, and performance measures. We have recently done an update to the congestion management process in November of 2019. We also had the development of the regional mobility strategy on December 2019, which was developed by TxDOT in cooperation with the MPO. As you recall, this RMS was developed to help define the future of our region in terms of mobility, liability, and economic development. There's also been work that Asian TV has been developing for the multimodal needs assessment. And UTEP has done an analysis on the national goals metrics that are needed to be reported. So all this will be incorporated into the, as I mentioned, the development of the goals and objectives. Next slide, please. Very briefly, at the introduction or kickoff meeting in March, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and what are the federal requirements of an MTP was provided. So it is a 25-year Metropolitan Transportation Plan update that needs an air quality conformity analysis. There will be incorporation of the FAST Act performance-based planning principle, and the MPO needs to ensure compliance with the federal regulations. And the flow diagram that you have on your right, I have circled in blue what are the required elements, public visioning process, the local planning, and the national goals, I'm sorry. In the light blue, there are internal analysis, and this is our project selection process that we use the decision lens tool, and the multimodal analysis that I mentioned that is being developed by HNTV in coordination with TxDOT. And all this is going to be used or incorporated into the final outputs that will be the goals, objectives, and the performance measures. Next slide, please. Also, you have seen the schedule. It was presented at the introduction and following presentations. This is just a more condensed and updated schedule. I'm sorry we didn't update this from the TPAC meeting, but we are at the end of February. We have completed the demographic update and calibration and validation of the model. We're initiating the project coding for the forecast years and also finalizing the project list. Also, the development of the draft chapters has initiated, and we're working on the development of all these. So we need to have the final documents by end of October, early November, to initiate public comment and have a TPB approval before we submit it for conformity determination review. Next slide, please. Back in August, HNTB presented the results of the public visioning workshops. After the online workshops, meetings, and survey that was conducted, this survey included 5 exercises that I have here on the slide. One of them was to ask the participants to rank their transportation priorities. And this is the criteria, how they ranked their priority. It's number 1, safety. As you can see, quality of life ranked second. So this information was taken into consideration for the development of the goals and objectives. Next slide, please. Also, at the September meeting, as I mentioned, TPB adopted the decision lens criteria and weights after doing the pairwise comparison of these criteria, if you remember. So these are the criteria categories, and these are more specific to projects, but they also include the national goals, the CMP strategies, in addition to strategic priority, which includes resiliency, as we discussed this morning in our training, and also focuses on the scheduling and implementation of the project. The project system, in terms of projects, that if they fall within the national highway system and active transportation system, and how are they, if they're regional significance. So this is the ranking that was approved, and a priority, it was more focused on to strategic priority. Next slide, please. So taking as an input or into consideration the visioning feedback from public and the stakeholders, as well as the decision lens criteria and priorities, MPO staff believes that the vision that was laid out for the decision 2045 NTP is still valid, and it states a seamless and reliable multimodal network which enables connectivity, promotes quality of life and economic well-being, and preserves the human environment. Next slide. So the vision was primarily based on the national goals and objectives as required by the FAST Act. And these are safety, infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement, and economic vitality and economic sustainability. Next slide, please. So building upon the goals from Destino MTP, which included these 6 national goals that I just went over, as well as quality of life, which was added during the development of the Destino, and taking into consideration the feedback from the visioning process and the decision lens criteria, MPO is proposing to add one more goal, which is the implementation goal. And I will go in more detail on explaining what this goal is under the objectives. But this goal addresses the strategic priority criteria identified under decision lens, as you can see here in the table. We have the corresponding national goals and the corresponding decision lens criteria. Next slide, please. So, honoring the objectives that were laid out in Destino 2045 MTP and the objectives just recently established under the 2019 CMP, which are the ones colored in purple, we have under safety these objectives: reduce the number of fatalities and serious injuries related to traffic incidents, reduce the number of crashes at high-speed intersections with abnormal number of incidents, reduce the number of conflict points between vehicles and active transportation users, such as pedestrians and bicyclists. Under maintenance and operations, we have decreased the percentage of facilities and assets not in a state of good repair, increase the number of intelligent transportation system technology assets, reduce delay at traffic signals. Under mobility, we have reduced delay on major thoroughfares, reduced travel time to key destinations, improve response time and clearance capabilities for first responders and emergency personnel. Next slide, please. Increase the number of jobs. Under accessibility and travel choice, we have increased the number of jobs and key destinations that are accessible by all transportation modes. Ensure transportation system improvements provide equitable benefits to the region. Expand access to and improve reliability of transit services, particularly for underserved areas and areas with high transit need. Fill major connectivity gaps in the sidewalk, bike lane, and trail networks that support regional travel. Encourage infill development and transit supportive land use. Expand multimodal access at regional ports of entry. Under sustainability, we have increased the attractiveness of transportation options other than single occupancy vehicles, reduce emissions produced by vehicles, achieve maintenance destinations from EPA from criteria pollutants, increase percentage of transportation assets that use alternative energy sources. Next slide, please. Under economic vitality, we have improved accessibility to key tourist destinations, reduce the delay on designated freight corridors and roads connecting to intermodal or freight facilities, increase access to major employment centers, improve operational efficiency at regional ports of entry. Under the quality of life, we had under the Destino MTP prioritize projects that demonstrate progress towards one or more RMS or it said Destino goals and objectives. We are proposing to move these to the implementation goal and just changed a little bit the wording. So now we have these 2 objectives: to effectively schedule project development activities to lead the project on time. And this is achieved through the development of the schedules and monitored by the MPO through the project readiness report. Also, another objective is to develop cost-effective projects and programs aimed at reducing the cost associated with constructing, operating, and maintaining the regional transportation system. And for quality of life, we added two objectives: preserve and enhance the natural environment, improve air quality, and promote activity lifestyles, encourage livable communities which support sustainability and economic vitality. Next slide, please. So today we'll be asking for your adoption of these goals and objectives. And for the next few months, as part of the development of the MTP, we will be finalizing the performance measures, and we'll come back to present those to you at a later meeting. We're finalizing also the needs assessment and multimodal network evaluation. And we, as I mentioned, we initiated the development of the alternatives and the model runs that we'll hope to finalize by the end of March. This completes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller? Yeah, you're muted.
Thank you for your presentation, and we've been waiting for this. I was happy to participate in the Decision Lens process earlier, and have been. This is very interesting. I do have some comments here. If we are to approve these goals or establish these as our goals and objectives, the first question I would have is how does that affect our current process of actual project selection? How do we change or alter the present way we do things to meet these goals or objectives? Just at looking at this, it would seem that this process seems to favor larger, more regional-based projects, and it's going to be harder for smaller yet vital local projects to rank very well in this process. So, can you comment to that?
Sonia, I can take that. This is Eduardo. Alderman Miller, yeah, this is always a balance that we need to try to reach. In a way, yes, the MPO looks at the regionally significant projects, and which is really the charge of the MPO. However, as you all know, we also consider and look at the needs of each of the members of the MPO, and we have we've made a really big effort to make sure that even the smaller communities get their share, and we address also the needs of the smaller communities. So I can't give you an exact answer, but it is part of the process, right? We do look at the regionally significant projects, but at the same time, internally we understand and we respect the needs of the smaller communities, because again, a project that is probably the top priority for the town of Horizon City, may not be regionally significant in the sense that it's not a freeway, but at the same time, it is very important for you all. So
Right.
we're striking that balance.
I would differ in your opinion there. Even though it might be a localized project, it can at the same time have regional significance by movement of workforce, by there's several factors that could go into just having a localized project affect the whole region. So I kind of differ on your assessment that they would only benefit the localized area. But anyway, to move on from that, and I understand that we're working hard to balance these out. But it just seems to me like the Decision Lens adds, and these goals and objectives that you want us to adopt are pushing us further and further away from the smaller localized projects. But as you've answered that, just to go on, we had economic vitality as part of our is ranked relatively far down the list from the decision lens process. However, just this morning we heard a lengthy and very good, extensive presentation on the effect of the bridges and the border master plan. It seems like we have a little bit of a disconnect between these two because economic vitality is so far down on the list, and yet everybody understands the importance of international trade. So can you kind of explain why there is this disconnect, or this why that is?
Absolutely. So back months ago when we asked the board to sort of like give us the relative weights for the decision lens exercise. Well, what we tried to explain then is that decision lens is only one of the tools that help us, in the selection of projects and building our MTP. It's not the only one. I was surprised to see, economic development, rank a bit low, but it really did not have a big necessarily that was not the determining criteria to select projects. In fact, we are going through the project selection process as we speak. So decision lens gave us some information, but what is also very important, if you recall, we asked each of the all the agencies that participate in the MPO, TxDOT, the City of El Paso, the Town of Horizon, everybody, to also rank your projects, right? And so, that ranking, we are combining it also, comparing it to decision lens, and at the same time, the internal analysis that we are performing as we speak in terms of identifying the future needs. So as we build the project list, we're going to make sure that the projects that make it, or that we recommend for inclusion in the plan, meet all these different goals and objectives. So again, decision lens is not the only tool that we have to select projects for inclusion in the plan. I hope that answers your question, Alderman.
But it seems to be the only tool that we use to develop these goals and objectives.
No. The goals and objectives that we're asking you to address, as Sonia explained, come from a variety of sources, right? One of them was, what was already included in the past plan. That was sort of like a starting point. At the same time, we need to incorporate the national goals, because that is part of the process, right? And then we modify it also with some of the local priorities, right? So at the end, what we're asking the board to adopt is really sort of like a combination of all these things. Again, I don't think that the goals that were adopted for the past plan, for the 2045 Destino plan, changed dramatically. So that's why we felt comfortable using that as a starting point. But at the same time, we do need to incorporate the national goals, because that we have to. That's a part of the federal process, but also modify them and tweak them for our local needs. So I think that's why Sonia was explaining, going through the different tables and the tweaks that we're making to these goals.
So I guess what's important for going forward when we come down to the actual selection process of how projects compete is how those tweaks are made.
Absolutely. And now we are in getting into that phase of really going into the project selection process. As you well know, the other important part of the process is a financial constraint, right? So now that we have the preliminary numbers for the fiscal year 22 UTP, which is something that I'm going to cover in the report later on. Now we have the piece that we were missing, right? So that, because again, we have to financially constrain our plan. So now we're going to be working on and as we go through the list of the process of selecting projects and developing that project list, we will bring it back to TPAC and to the policy board for sure. I mean, we're just beginning that intense phase of the development.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions? At this time, then I would entertain a motion to adopt the draft goals and objectives under item number 7.
I move to approve. This is Cassandra.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Rivera.
Right. Okay, we now have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, at this point, I'd like to vote. Is there anybody that is opposed to it? Hearing nobody opposed, then we adopt item number 7 on our agenda. And now we go to reports and discussions, and we will go to item number 9.
Okay. Item 9 is the tracking mechanisms for all MPO funded projects. This is just a very brief statement, Madam Chair. As you all know, the MPO is striving to make sure that every project or every program or whatever that receives funding from the MPO, that we track, make sure that we know where the funds are going and how it's being used in a timely basis. So we have several mechanisms, as you know, the quarterly project readiness report that we present to TPAC and to the board, that captures a good chunk of the projects, the ones that are included in the tip. Then the projects that are part of RMS 2020 is another tracking mechanism that we have, and there's overlap clearly. However, we found out there's a couple of projects or categories of projects that the MPO is not tracking, and very specifically the FTA transfers that initiate with Federal Highway Category 5 with our CMAQ funds that are transferred to FTA for Sun Metro. So we've been working with Sun Metro in the last year and a half to make sure that we have a better tracking mechanism, because what happens is that money goes over to FTA, and then we really don't have any formal way of tracking it, right? So Sun Metro follows more of the FTA rules, but what's been missing is the connection back to the MPO. And the other type of a project that we haven't been tracking very closely are when funds are provided for engineering only, for a project, right? So typically the engineering phase is tied to a construction phase as well, right? And that's how we track it. But when the funds are for a project that does not have a formal construction deadline, those are, those were falling through the cracks. So just this is more of an FYI to everybody that we're going to be starting to ask for information on how those projects are going and report it on a regular basis back to the policy board.
Thank you. Any questions for Eduardo? Let's move on. Oh, we're going to table item number 10 on our agenda, and we're going to move on to item 11.
Okay. I don't know if we need a motion to table that item 10 being a report, Madam Chair.
Sergio, do we need a motion to table or not?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, you do.
I'll make
All
a
right,
motion to
Can I
table
make the
item
motion?
10.
All right. There's a motion to table by, I'm not sure I heard the person.
Oscar. I'm Oscar.
Thank you, Mayor. A second?
I second. Mayor
Okay, yeah. Any questions, any discussions on the reason? Hearing none at this time, let's move on to the vote to table the discussion. Anybody opposed? No opposition, it passes. Let's go then to item 11.
All right, item 11 is a fiscal year 2022 Unified Transportation Program preliminary funding levels. So on that, Madam Chair, I'll take this one. The TxDOT staff in Austin presented these preliminary or draft funding levels to the Texas Transportation Commission last month. So this is a presentation that they showed. I just want to go very briefly. If you can advance to slide number 7, Gabby, please. Again, with the understanding that these are draft numbers, but overall, I think we got very good news in the sense that one more, Gabby, please. There we go. And you know that Rep. Ortega, as well as the other members of the state delegation, that the initial forecast, financial forecast that the controller was giving out in the summer looked really bad. Mostly as a consequence of COVID. Some of the state revenue or funding sources like Prop 1 and Prop 7 looked, the forecasts were pretty dire. The good news now that we received in January is that although the revenue projections for Prop 1 and Prop 7 are still below last year, but it's not that bad. I mean, there's been a rebound, so that's good news. And then what you see there on the table to the left, the second column, you see the estimated federal COVID relief at the tune of $700 million. That's really what is making a big difference. So the combination of that makes the fiscal year 22 good news in that it's a little bit bigger overall than the fiscal year 21 UTP. So understanding that the UTP is a 10-year program and it's at the state level, but not only did not reduce the dollar amount, but it made it a little bit bigger, which is wonderful news in my opinion. Can we move on to the next slide, Gabby? I think it's slide number 10. Next one, please. That one right there. So in this table, what they're presenting are the dollar amounts for the UTP, not counting the local contributions. You see there the total distribution, comparing the 21 UTP at 68 billion, 68.5. The forecast for 22 is 68.65. So there's a small difference of $122 million. But what is also very good news is that if you look at the changes in categories 5 and 7, if you follow those rows, this UTP is providing 94.75 million more to category 5 CMAQ that we received those funds in El Paso, as well as category 7. There's $382 million additional to what was received. So we are expecting to have a little bit more money coming in categories 5 and 7, which are the two categories that we use mostly to fund the local government projects. So can you move on to 12, Gabby, please? There we go. So the next steps that you see there in the development of the UTP, the first one there, distribute draft planning targets to all the districts and MPOs. That happened this past week. So we are beginning to look at the numbers that are specific to the El Paso MPO and to the El Paso District of TxDOT. And, at first glance, they look good. So we are getting a little more money in categories 5 and 7. So as soon as we have more details, we'll come back and report that. But I think the message here is that overall it's good news. Now, this is on top of anything else that may happen at the federal level with any Recovery Act or a new infrastructure bill that's been, a lot of discussions. But specifically with the UTP, which is what we use mostly to constrain our documents, it's good news. So now that we have these numbers, and trying to tie it back to the development of the RMS 2050 MTP that we discussed earlier with Sonia, now we have, I think, all the information that we need to start building the project list for the MTP. and remain on schedule to develop the MTP.
Okay.
So that's all I have for this report. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer.
That was very good news on the presentation that was made in front of the commission in January. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Calvo? Go ahead and proceed then, Mr. Calvo, on item 12.
All right, item 12 is the RMS 2050 Travel Demand Model Status Report. Salvador Gonzalez will give a brief update.
Yes, good day, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm having some issues with my internet.
Yeah, but we can hear you.
So, a brief update on the new TDM progress. First and most important, and I guess Tony already mentioned this, the new TDM has been validated and has been presented to and currently under review by TxDOT and New Mexico DOT. While that review is underway, we are still doing a lot of work. First of all, we're coding the new performance measures. It'll have new performance measures, or TDM. Also, we are adapting a new series of graphs and dynamic maps. This will make it very interactive, our TDM, anybody that wants to check the results of any of the runs. And finally, we are preparing to provide training sessions on the use of the new TDM. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Let's move on then to item 13.
All right, 13, Regional Mobility Strategy RMS 2020 Project Development Status Report. This is again the monthly report that we provide to you all every month. The information is in your backup. No major issues to report. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay. There's no questions. Item 14, Executive Director's Report.
So just very briefly, item A and B are just updates on recent conferences that staff attended, including myself. The annual TRB conference that was held in last month. As you know, the TRB conference is the biggest conference worldwide for transportation. In my opinion, it was a little bit of a letdown. Doing it remotely, it's not the same thing as being in person, missing out on a lot of the interactions that happen outside of the conference rooms. But a lot of the topics had to do with COVID. What are we doing? How is COVID going to influence, our future, and specifically for us, a planning process. And, there's some ideas, some thoughts, but really nobody has much of a real idea of how this is going to be impacting us, long term. I won't go into a lot of details. And the item B, which is the TxDOT Transportation Forum that was held earlier this month, similar thing. This is, one of the largest TxDOT conferences. Day and a half. A lot of it was again remotely done virtually. Some good topics, and if you have any questions or interest in knowing what was discussed, feel free to call me. We can share some of the presentations as well. So that's all I have for the report, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Eduardo, for being brief. I know that I asked of that because of the fact that we had such a long item discussion with Secretary Hughes. At this point in time, I want to thank all of the policy board members for hanging on. This has been a really lengthy meeting, but I appreciate everybody that has stayed this long with us. I would now take a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
All right, then at this time, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a weekend.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thanks.